Wolfpack. Chapter 1. Thero swooped low, inhaling the sweet scent of humans as a warm southern breeze ruffled his wings. His scouting loop complete, nothing new in the Elysium camp, he circled north to cross the Ruget River and return to Skotar. The fox canine that hung on a leather ribbon around his neck skittered over his sternum and clanked against a knife handle in his baldric. Instead of landing at camp and giving another boring report to Captain Firth about the inactivity of the humans across the river, Thero crossed the border and flew east, the waning moon and laughing stars silhouetting the dense forest. With his eagle-sharp vision, he spotted a black beast stalking through the trees far below. He tucked in his long wings and dove, pulling up barely in time to alight with aching gracefulness on a thick tree branch. The scent of blossoms clogged his sensitive nose. Spring was here. It had been a long winter of waiting, but with the Draco saying reinforcements almost arrived, they would attack Elysium within days. It didn't feel like soon enough. Impatience revved through his veins, fluttering his wings as he crouched, his focus riveted on his prey. Inky black scales covered a body the size of a ram. Poisonous horns glinted in the moonlight as its narrow head swiveled back and forth. An iron-toothed crosk on the hunt. A rare sight. Had it sniffed out the Draco camp? Thero's heart hammered in eagerness at the same time his skin chilled. He palmed the tooth that hung around his neck. He wore the canine to impress the great chief Laconius. And Laconius had not even noticed Thero's prize. Laconius would take note of this. Only the bravest, fiercest Dracos could take down an iron-toothed crosk. At least in a fair fight. Thero lifted his bow off his back and pulled an arrow from the quiver between his wings. The crosk's scaled skin was virtually impenetrable, the weak spots being underneath at the joints. From above, there was only 2 tiny targets for Thero. The wind shifted and the beast stopped and sniffed. It turned and padded toward Thero's tree. Thero set his arrow and pulled on the string. He whistled. The iron-toothed crosk looked up and Thero released. The arrow sliced into the crosk's right eye. He grinned as his prey let out a bone-chilling howl. It kicked and screamed and clawed at the tree trunk. Blood squirted down its face. Thero fired another arrow. The Draco's steel tip hit the thrashing creature's brow and bounced off. He cursed. Braced against the tree trunk, he waited for the crosk to weaken and slow. It didn't. Its claws cut deep grooves in the tree harboring Thero. The beast looked up with its one good eye and snarled out a promise of death. Thero ignored the fear in his belly and took aim. The arrow struck true, bearing deep into the skull. Blinded, the crosk flailed and screamed. Thero tucked his bow into the case between his wings on his back. He waited. And waited. Red sprayed the tree trunk and dribbled down black scales. Thero was hungry. He swallowed as he thought of the warm meal that awaited him back at camp. He yawned and leaned against the tree, while down below, the beast cried and tore out chunks of earth. It was deep night by the time the iron-toothed crosk slumped into the jagged grave it had dug. Thero slid his dagger free. Scanning the trees for company, he glided down. The fearsome face came into focus. Blood crusted over dead black lips. Thero pulled another knife and squeezed the handles tight. His pulse rang louder than the war horns as he crouched by his motionless prize. He jabbed a blade into the weak spot underneath its forearm. The crosk didn't move, and Thero let out a sigh of relief. He pulled an arrow free with a sickening pop. The eyeballs came too. He tasted one, didn't like it, and cut the rest off, flicking the pieces into the dirt. He wiped his arrows clean on the brown grass. He'd helped the steelsmith make the weapons, using his own feathers as fletching. Now, for his prize. He couldn't pry the jaws open without anchoring the body. Talons curled at the ends of Thero's half-human feet. He hadn't worn boots since his transformation into an eagle Draco. The crosk's scales were cold against the bare pads of Thero's foot as he stood on its neck. Panting, he sawed through jawbone and muscle. Grateful for the strength and sharpness of his Draco steel, he cut out the largest tooth, a serrated barb as long as Thero's finger. He held it up to the starlight, a victorious grin spreading over his face. Fleeing the scene, he flapped up to a high branch. Congealed gore stained the tooth. He left it. Blood spatter was a good look. He untied the fox tooth from the leather around his neck and tossed it to the wind. Carefully, he secured the deadly beauty so it hung at his sternum. While he flew back to camp, he imagined the look of pride the crossed tooth would bring to Laconius's face. Firth would be so jealous. Not quite ready to leave his realm in the sky, Thero circled camp, savoring his treasure. Below him, a few night-loving Dracos sang crisscross the pass. The fools didn't look up. They never did. A familiar fox Draco crept up to Firth's tent. There was only one reason Dara would visit their wolf Draco captain in the middle of the night, with her vest unbuttoned, revealing cleavage velveted in short amber fur. Now that Firth's slave had left him, Dara was making her move. Thero grated his teeth, hating Firth. Even after Firth had been whipped raw yesterday, humiliated in front of the entire army, the female still flocked to him. Tasting the pain of Firth's punishment on the cold air and hearing the music of the crop had been a sweet pleasure. Dara disappeared inside Firth's tent. Seconds later, she stalked back out. Satisfaction warmed Thero's feathery chest. Rejected again. He tilted his wings, intent on landing next to her, but storming footsteps kept him airborne, directly below Thero. Firth sprinted past, his sword drawn, his wolfish face hardened into threatening lines, and his golden eyes bright with fury. Thero flinched, then cursed his cowardly reaction and forced his chin up. He was not afraid of Firth. Coming out of the shadows, Dara turned to follow their captain. Thero landed in front of her. She jerked to a halt inches before walking into his chest. She narrowed her honey eyes and scrunched the fur on her forehead in a scowl. "What's that?" Her gaze dropped to his chest. "An upgrade from the little fox trinket." Her frown deepened. So sensitive, always taking it personally when he mocked foxes. She moved to walk past him, but he flared his wings. "Come with me. It will be easier to follow Firth from the air." She hesitated. Then, to his pleasure, she nodded. His nerves hummed as he wrapped his arms around her back and pulled her waist against his own. The scent of fox and female tickled his nose and warmed his blood. As he spread his brown wings, he held her closer and tighter than necessary, but she didn't need to know that. With all the elegance he could muster, he lifted her into the night air, into his domain. She let out a low gasp that sent a secret thrill through him. Her head rested against his neck. Her hands held tight to his shoulders. Flying was pleasure. Flying with Dara's body flush against his was... "He went that way," Dara said, interrupting his fantasy. She craned her neck and pointed with her nose. He lifted a wing and tilted south. 20 feet below, 3 Draco soldiers, swords drawn, followed Firth into the forest south of camp. Thero's pulse hitched. Had the humans attacked? He was itching to fight, put his training to the test. Through a gap in the skinny spring treetops, Captain Firth came into view, as well as a white wolf, a woman in Elysium uniform, and an injured man lying on the ground. The scent of blood and wolf and human rose on the wind. Thero inhaled, racking his brain for memories that came with that smell. He flashed back to the night of Captain Jobu's murder. This was the human with a wolf abomination that had killed their previous captain. And Firth was going to kill the assassin before he could escape. Firth would get all the praise. Forget that Firth let a slave escape. Forget yesterday's lashing. Forget that Firth still had human patches of skin on his face and chest. Firth would be the hero. Again. Killing an iron-toothed cross was nothing to killing an enemy abomination. Firth swallowed bitterness. He and Dara watched Firth rise to meet the 3 Draco soldiers as they approached. But instead of directing them to take the humans prisoner, Firth held up his sword. Moonlight glinted off Draco's steel as Firth brought his blade down against his own soldiers. Thero reeled back, squinting in disbelief as Firth attacked his Draco brothers. Dara let out a strangled cry as the white wolf abomination joined the fight, helping Firth kill the last 2 soldiers. Thero sucked in air. He exhaled. Firth was a traitor. Okay, I hope you will read the rest.